The autumn wind carried the scent of old wood smoke and leather across the front porch of the Montana ranch. Jeremiah McAllister, 84 years old with hands gnarled like ancient tree roots, sat in his rocking chair and watched the sun paint the Rocky Mountains gold. His grandson Tommy, 12 years old and full of restless energy, sat cross-legged on the wooden planks beside him, waiting. The boy had asked the question 3 times now. Each time, the old man had smiled and looked away toward those distant peaks. But tonight, as the shadows grew long and the air turned crisp with the promise of winter, Jeremiah finally nodded. "You want to know how I met your grandmother?" he said. His voice carried the weight of half a century, rough as gravel but steady as stone. Tommy leaned forward. "Yes, Grandpa. Mama says you two had a story worth telling." Jeremiah's weathered face creased into something between a smile and a wince. He reached for the old Winchester rifle mounted above the door, running his fingers along the worn stock. "This rifle here," he said quietly, "saved my life more times than I can count. But it was your grandmother who saved my soul." He settled back into his chair, the wood creaking beneath him. "I was 29 years old, boy, young enough to be foolish, old enough to know better. And I was tied to a wooden post like Odugi, waiting to be traded for a bottle of whiskey." Tommy's eyes went wide. The old man closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice seemed to drift across 55 years of memory, back to a time when the mountains were wilder and men lived by codes written in blood and survival. "It was late autumn 1876, Colorado Territory, and I was about to meet the woman who would change everything." The scene dissolved, flowing backward through time like water running upstream, until the mountains were younger and the man who would become old Jeremiah was still called Bear. The renegade trading post sat in a natural depression where an aspen grove met a narrow canyon. The trees had already dropped most of their leaves, leaving skeletal branches that clawed at the gray afternoon sky. The place stank of unwashed men, spoiled meat, and the peculiar mix of fear and greed that hung over any camp where outlaws and renegades traded in things the law would not permit. Jeremiah McAllister stood tied to a thick post in the center of the camp. His wrists were bound behind him with rawhide cord that had been soaked in water, then left to dry and shrink, cutting into his skin with every small movement. His buckskin shirt was torn at the shoulder, and dried blood crusted the left side of his face where Jake Hollis had struck him with a pistol barrel 4 days earlier. But his eyes were clear. That was the thing that would save him, though he did not know it yet. His eyes moved constantly, cataloging every face, every weapon, every possible path through the chaos of the camp. He had learned long ago that panic was a luxury a man could not afford. His beard was thick and reddish-brown, grown long over 2 years of mountain solitude. His hair hung past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather. A scar ran down his left cheek in the distinct pattern of a bear's claw, 3 parallel lines that had nearly cost him his eye during a trapline dispute years before. His shoulders were broad from years of hauling beaver pelts and splitting firewood. His hands, now bound and going numb, were calloused and strong. Around him, the camp seethed with activity. Outlaws with sun-darkened faces and dead eyes haggled over stolen goods spread across blankets. Apache renegades, men who had broken from their tribes for reasons both honorable and shameful, moved through the crowd with the wariness of wolves. The sound was a constant buzz of languages, English mixed with Spanish and Apache, punctuated by harsh laughter and the occasional shout. Jeremiah counted weapons out of habit. 12 rifles, 8 visible pistols, countless knives, 2 horses with good saddles. The information stored itself in his mind like ammunition in a cartridge belt, ready to be used if an opportunity presented itself. A man emerged from one of the larger shelters, Gannon McLeod, called Red for the shock of copper hair that had faded to silver but still held hints of its former color. He was 52 years old, broad across the shoulders, with a patch of tanned leather covering his left eye. The other eye, pale blue and sharp as broken glass, swept across the camp and landed on Jeremiah. For a moment, neither man spoke. They had history, these two. 3 years back, during the worst blizzard Jeremiah had ever seen, he had found Gannon half frozen in a snowdrift, had dragged him to a cave, shared his fire, his food, his whiskey, had kept the older man alive through 3 days of wind that could strip the hide off a buffalo. Gannon walked closer now, his boots crunching through the scatter of fallen leaves. He stopped, 5 feet from the post, and studied Jeremiah with that single eye. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Bear McAllister, thought you died up in them mountains." Jeremiah said nothing. His jaw was tight, but his gaze was steady. Gannon leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper that only Jeremiah could hear. "I ain't gonna help you, Bear, but I ain't gonna hurt you neither. You're on your own." Then he straightened and walked away, leaving Jeremiah to wonder whether that whispered message was mercy or simply the settling of an old debt. 3 years ago, Jeremiah had saved Gannon's life. Now Gannon was offering neutrality. In a place like this, neutrality was worth more than gold. The memory of how he had arrived here played through Jeremiah's mind like a nightmare he could not escape. 4 days earlier, he had been checking trap lines along the Arkansas River, moving through the aspens in the pre-dawn silence that he had come to love. The mountains had been his refuge for 2 years, ever since Jake Hollis had destroyed everything Jeremiah had built. Jake. The name sat in his mouth like poison. They had been partners once. Two young men working the high country, setting beaver traps and dreaming of the money they would make. For 2 seasons they had worked together, splitting the catch, sharing the labor, trusting each other with their lives. By the winter of 1874, they had accumulated 300 prime beaver pelts, worth $900, a fortune for two men in their 20s. But Jake had wanted to sell early, before the spring market when prices would rise. Jeremiah had argued for patience. They had fought about it, voices raised in a tiny cabin while snow piled up outside. And one morning Jeremiah had woken to find Jake gone. The pelts gone. Everything gone. 3 days later, a territorial marshal had come looking for Jeremiah, accusing him of theft. Jake had sold the pelts in Denver and told the buyer that his partner had stolen them. Jake had a bill of sale. Jeremiah had nothing but his word. In the Colorado territory, a man's word against another man's paperwork was worth about as much as spit in the wind. The marshal had put a bounty on him. $500, dead or alive. So Jeremiah had run to the mountains, to the high country where the law did not reach and a man could disappear into the wilderness. For 2 years he had lived alone, trapping in the winter, hunting in the summer, avoiding any contact with civilization. He had told himself he was surviving, but deep in his heart, in the part of himself he did not like to examine, he knew the truth. He had been waiting to die. Then 4 days ago, riding alone through the aspens, he had been ambushed. Jake Hollis and 3 other men had come out of the trees with rifles raised. There had been no warning, no chance to run. Jake had smiled as he struck Jeremiah with the pistol, that same crooked smile from their partnership days. "Hello, Bear," Jake had said. "Told you I'd find you eventually." Now Jeremiah stood tied to a post in a renegade camp, about to be sold or traded or simply shot for entertainment. His mind worked through possibilities, but each one ended in the same place. There was no escape, no help coming, no miracle waiting. He had made his peace with it, or thought he had. Then the woman appeared. She came from the north side of the camp, moving through the crowd with the careful grace of a deer crossing an open meadow. She was Apache, that much was clear from her dress and bearing. Her clothing was torn and stained, a deerskin shirt that had once been decorated with beadwork but now hung in tatters. Her skirt was leather, ripped along the hem from running through brush. Her hair fell long and black across her shoulders, tangled and unkempt. But her eyes were what caught Jeremiah's attention. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held a clarity and intelligence that cut through the chaos around her like a knife through fog. She was scanning the camp, cataloging it the same way Jeremiah had, looking for threats and opportunities with the practiced awareness of someone who had spent too long being hunted. She was 24 years old, though she carried herself with the weariness of someone much older. Her name was Naira, daughter of a chieftain, though that title meant nothing now. For 12 days she had been running, fleeing from accusations she could not disprove and enemies she could not fight. The memory of it was still fresh, still sharp enough to cut. 12 days ago, she had been gathering medicinal herbs along the Cimarron River, far from her people's camp. She had heard gunshots in the distance, rapid fire that spoke of ambush rather than hunting. By the time she had climbed the ridge to see what was happening, the shooting had stopped. A wagon lay overturned in the river bottom. 3 white traders, all dead. their goods scattered, their horses gone, and Naira standing on the ridge with a basket of herbs visible to anyone who looked up. 2 days later, the accusations had begun. Dakota, her uncle, her father's younger brother, had stood before the tribal council and declared that Naira had led renegades to attack the traders, that she had betrayed her people's peace with the whites, that she was a traitor. She had tried to defend herself, but the council had listened to Dakota. He was a warrior, respected and feared. She was just a woman, daughter of a dead chieftain. Her word carried no weight against his, but Naira knew the truth. She had seen Dakota whispering with his warriors in the days before the attack, had heard fragments of conversation that made no sense at the time but now assembled themselves into a terrible pattern. Dakota had orchestrated the attack. Dakota had killed those traitors, and Dakota was using her as a scapegoat to cover his crime. More than that, Dakota wanted her dead for reasons that went deeper than this single incident. 2 years ago, Dakota had killed her father during what was supposed to be a hunting expedition. He had returned alone, claiming Comanche raiders had ambushed them. The tribe had believed him. They had made him chieftain in her father's place. But Naira had heard him talking to his warriors late one night when he thought no one was listening. She had heard him boast about how cleanly it had been done, how no one suspected. She had confronted him the next morning, and he had laughed. "Prove it," he had said. She could not. And now, 2 years later, Dakota had found a way to remove the last threat to his power. As long as Naira lived, as long as she carried her father's bloodline marked by the eagle tattoo on her wrist, Dakota's claim to leadership would be questioned by some. She was evidence of his crime, walking and breathing. So she had run, taking only what she could carry: a small leather pouch containing a beaded necklace that had belonged to her mother, a bone-handled knife, and a beaded bracelet worked with the eagle symbol. These were all that remained of her old life. For 12 days she had moved through the mountains, avoiding Apache scouts and white bounty hunters alike. Dakota had been clever. He had spread word among the white settlements that Naira was a murderer, that there was a $200 reward for her capture. Now she was hunted by two groups, each with their own reasons to want her dead or captured. She had found this renegade camp yesterday, desperate for shelter and food. She had hoped to trade for supplies and disappear again before anyone recognized her. But as she moved through the crowd now, she heard whispers, heard Dakota's name spoken in Apache. Some of these renegades were loyal to him. She needed to leave, soon. But she had nothing to trade, no way to get supplies. Her pouch held only sentimental treasures, things that meant everything to her and nothing to anyone else. Then she saw the man tied to the post. He was white, which meant nothing to her by itself. She had known good white men and evil ones, just as she had known good and evil among her own people. But there was something in the way he stood, even bound and beaten, that caught her attention. He was not begging, not pleading, not trying to charm or cajole his captors. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, his eyes moving constantly, his mind clearly working. She recognized the look. It was the same look she saw in her own reflection when she stopped by streams to drink. The look of someone who had learned that survival required constant attention, constant calculation. She watched him for several minutes, studying the way he shifted his weight to ease the strain on his wrists, the way his jaw tightened when pain shot through his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every person who came near. This was not a weak man, not a careless one. He was holding himself together through discipline and will, long after many others would have broken. Something stirred in her chest, not attraction, not yet, but recognition. This man understood what it meant to be hunted. She could see it in every line of his body. A shout went up from across the camp. Gannon McLeod was calling for attention, his voice cutting through the general noise like an axe through wood. "All right, boys," he hollered. "Time to settle accounts. One white man, strong back, mean disposition, good for hauling or hanging, depending on your preference." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Men started to gather around the post, forming a rough circle. Naira moved closer, staying at the edge but watching carefully. Jake Hollis pushed his way to the front. He was 31 years old, with a yellow beard and a face reddened by too much whiskey and too much sun. He wore 2 pistols on his belt, the mark of a man who trusted no one and wanted everyone to know he was dangerous. I'll start the bidding, Jake called out. He held up a bottle, half full of amber liquid. One bottle of genuine rot-gut whiskey, smooth as turpentine and twice as effective. More laughter. Someone shouted, "That ain't worth spit, Hollis." Another voice, "Half a sack of flour, good for making bread or paste, depending on how much weevil is in it." "My old saddle blanket." This from a gap-toothed outlaw who waved a tattered piece of wool. "Only got 3 holes in it, and one of them is barely noticeable." The bids were jokes, insults disguised as offers. No one here actually wanted to buy a bound man. They just wanted entertainment, wanted to see him squirm, wanted to feel superior to someone more unfortunate than themselves. Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but he did not look down. He did not give them the satisfaction of seeing shame or fear. He stood straight, breathing through the pain in his ribs and the fire in his wrists, and waited for this humiliation to end. That was when Naira made her decision. She did not fully understand it herself. Perhaps it was the recognition she had felt, seeing in him the same hunted wariness that she carried. Perhaps it was simple human compassion, the unwillingness to watch another person destroyed for sport. Perhaps it was something more calculating, the knowledge that she needed an ally in this man, for all his current misfortune, seemed capable and strong. Or perhaps it was simply that she was tired of being alone, tired of running without anyone to watch her back, tired of sleeping with one eye open and waking with a knife in her hand. She stepped forward, moving from the edge of the crowd into the open space around the post. Conversations quieted, heads turned. In a camp full of rough men and casual violence, the appearance of a woman alone carried weight. She was not property here, not yet, but she was vulnerable. Everyone knew it. The silence that fell was part curiosity, part predatory interest. Naira reached into her pouch with trembling fingers. She knew what this would cost her. The beaded bracelet was the last piece of her father's legacy, the last connection to the life she had lost. Her mother had made it, working by firelight during the winter before she died, weaving blue turquoise beads and silver into the pattern of an eagle. It had been given to Naira on her 16th birthday, marking her as chieftain's daughter. Losing it meant cutting the last tie to her past, but keeping it would not save her life, would not give her shelter, would not give her someone she could trust, even in a little. She pulled out the bracelet and held it up. The afternoon light caught the beads, making them glow like pieces of sky. The crowd murmured. Even these hard men recognized quality work when they saw it. Gannon McLeod walked closer, his single eye narrowing as he examined the bracelet. He reached out and took it from her hand, turning it over, feeling the weight of the silver, judging the craftsmanship. "This worth $20, maybe more," he said. Then he looked at her directly. "You sure about this, girl?" Naira met his gaze without flinching. When she spoke, her voice was rough from days without rest, but it was steady. "Free him. He goes with me." A long silence followed. It was not respect. It was surprise. A woman alone, Apache, probably running from something, was bidding on a white man. The incongruity of it stopped even the most jaded observers. Gannon studied her for another moment, then nodded once. He had seen stranger things in his years running this camp, and the bracelet was worth more than anything else that had been offered. "Deal," he said. He gestured to 2 men standing near. "Cut him loose." They moved forward with knives, sawing through the rawhide cords. Jeremiah's arms dropped forward, and blood rushed back into his hands with 1,000 needles of pain. He staggered slightly, catching himself, then straightened as circulation returned. One of the men shoved him toward Naira, trying to make him stumble. She stepped between them without thinking, blocking the push with her body. She did not touch Jeremiah, but her stance made it clear she would not allow more violence. Jeremiah looked at her properly for the first time. Confusion tightened his features. He did not understand what had just happened, why this woman would trade anything for a stranger, or whether this new situation was better or worse than being tied to a post. But before he could speak, Jake Hollis stepped forward, blocking their path. "Hold on now," Jake said, his voice carrying an edge like broken glass. He looked past Naira to Jeremiah, and his smile was ugly. "You think you can just walk out bare, after what you done?" Jeremiah's voice was hoarse from disuse, but it came out strong. I ain't your concern no more, Jake. The hell you ain't. Jake's hand dropped to his pistol. You still got a bounty on your head. $500. That's more than some Apache trinket. Gannon McLeod stepped between them, his bulk suddenly imposing. His voice was flat, final. Deal's done, Hollis. Man's been sold. Back off. For a moment, the camp balanced on the edge of violence. Jake's hand stayed on his pistol. His face had gone red, and his eyes held the peculiar brightness of a man who had drunk too much whiskey and was looking for a reason to spill blood. Then he smiled again, that crooked smile that Jeremiah remembered too well. Fine, Jake said quietly. But this ain't over, Bear. Marcus Drummond is still out there, still looking for you. And when he finds you, no Apache girl is going to save you then. He turned and walked away, his posture radiating anger and wounded pride. Naira did not wait for more confrontation. She touched Jeremiah's arm lightly, just enough to get his attention, and tilted her head toward the edge of camp. He followed. They walked past the crude shelters and smoking fire pits, past men who watched them with calculating eyes. No one tried to stop them. Gannon's word held weight here, and he had declared the transaction complete. But Jeremiah could feel the attention on his back like a physical weight. They were not safe here, not even close. Naira led him to a small shelter she had built the night before, barely large enough for two people to crouch inside. It was hidden behind a large boulder, out of sight from the main camp, but close enough to hear if trouble started. She had constructed it from pine branches in an old piece of canvas she had found, creating a windbreak that offered minimal shelter, but at least some privacy. They stepped inside. The air was cold and still. Naira knelt and began building a small fire with shaking hands. Jeremiah lowered himself slowly on the opposite side, his ribs protesting every movement. His wrists were raw and bleeding where the cord had cut into them, and his shoulders burned with the agony of circulation returning after hours of being bound. But he was alive, and free after a fashion. He watched the woman work with the fire, noting how her hands trembled, how her breathing was tight and controlled. She was exhausted. That much was clear. But she was fighting through it with the same kind of discipline he had used while tied to the post. When the fire finally caught, small flames licking at the dry kindling, Naira sat back on her heels. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a strip of dried meat. She tore it in half and offered him the larger piece. Jeremiah took it, studying her face in the firelight. You didn't have to do that, he said. Naira did not look at him. She fed a dry branch into the small flames. I needed someone, she answered plainly. You were alone too. The words hung in the air between them, simple, honest, painful in their directness. Jeremiah chewed the dried meat slowly, his mind working through possibilities. He could leave. Nothing bound him to this woman except the fact that she had purchased his freedom. But leave to go where? Back to the mountains alone? Back to waiting for death to find him in some canyon or frozen pass? And there was something else. Something he did not want to examine too closely. When she had stepped between him and that man who had tried to shove him, when she had blocked violence with her own body, he had felt something stir. Not gratitude exactly. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The sense that this woman understood what it meant to stand alone against the world. When she finally looked at him, her voice came out softer than before, though still edged with exhaustion. You stay with me now, she said. It was not quite a command, not quite a request. You will be my husband. The words hit Jeremiah like cold water. He did not move for several seconds, processing every angle. Danger, risk, uncertainty, but also possibility, partnership, survival. He looked at her bruises, visible now in the firelight, at the torn clothing and the empty pouch, at the exhaustion she was forcing herself to push through, at the steadiness in her eyes despite everything she had clearly endured. Her words were not a command. They were a proposal from someone who had run out of choices and was making the only play left to her. Why? He asked finally. Because I do not want to be alone anymore. She said it without hesitation, without shame. And because you look like someone who would not break me. Jeremiah absorbed this slowly. He had spent 2 years alone in the mountains, telling himself he preferred it that way, telling himself he was better off without trust, without partnership. without anyone to betray him again. But the loneliness had been eating him alive. He knew that now, faced with this woman's raw honesty. He had been surviving, yes, but he had not been living. "You don't know me," he said, testing her certainty. "I know enough." Naira's eyes held his. "You did not beg when they laughed at you. You did not break when they hurt you. You watch for danger, not at me like prey. I need someone who watches danger." Jeremiah felt something in his chest, a tightness he had not felt in years. It might have been fear. It might have been hope. He was not sure which. "And if I say no," he asked, though he already knew he would not. Naira lowered her eyes to the fire. "Then you go back to post, or to mountains. But I think you do not want that." She was right. He did not want that. He did not want to go back to the slow death of isolation, the constant cold, the endless silence broken only by his own thoughts circling like wolves. "I was betrayed," he said quietly, "by a man I called brother. Jake Hollis. We trapped together for 2 seasons. He stole everything I built, then put a bounty on my head for the crime he committed." Naira nodded slowly. "I was betrayed too, by blood. My uncle killed my father. Now he hunts me." The parallel was so clear it needed no elaboration. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by similar wounds, similar losses, similar desperation. "I'll stay," Jeremiah said finally. "For now." Naira's shoulders eased slightly, tension bleeding out of them for the first time since he had seen her. "That is enough," she whispered. Outside, the sounds of the camp continued. Voices raised in argument or drunken song, the whicker of horses, the crackle of larger fires. But here in their small shelter, a different kind of fire was beginning. Not passion, not yet, but the first spark of something that might become trust. Then both of them heard it. Hoofbeats, coming from the north. Multiple horses moving at a steady pace. Naira's head snapped up, her body going rigid. She moved to the edge of the shelter and peered out through a gap in the canvas. Jeremiah moved beside her, close enough to feel her sudden tension. Through the gathering darkness, they could see riders approaching the camp. 4 men on horseback, moving with purpose. Even at a distance, Jeremiah could see they were Apache. Scouts, probably. Looking for someone, looking for her. Naira pulled back from the gap, her breathing quick and shallow. When she looked at Jeremiah, her eyes held fear for the first time since he had seen her. "We must leave," she whispered. "Now, before they come closer." Jeremiah did not argue. He had been a hunted man long enough to recognize when staying meant death. They gathered what little they had, moving in practiced silence. The water skin, the blanket, a few pieces of dried meat. Jeremiah's hands were still clumsy from his time-bound, but adrenaline was clearing his head, sharpening his senses. They slipped out the back of the shelter, using the boulder as cover. The camp was between them and the approaching riders, which gave them perhaps 10 minutes before anyone realized they were gone. Naira led the way, moving through the aspen grove with the confident grace of someone who had spent a lifetime reading terrain. Jeremiah followed, forcing his battered body to keep pace. Behind them, they heard voices raised in greeting as the scouts reached the camp. They moved for 30 minutes through the gathering dark, putting distance between themselves and the renegade post. The aspens gave way to denser forest, pine and spruce that rose tall and close together. The ground sloped upward, and Jeremiah's ribs protested with every breath, but he did not slow down. Finally, when the camp was far behind and the forest had wrapped them in darkness, Naira stopped. They were in a small clearing, barely 10 feet across, surrounded by thick brush, a natural hiding place. She sank down against a tree trunk, her endurance finally reaching its limit. Jeremiah sat beside her, both of them breathing hard, both listening for sounds of pursuit. None came. The forest was silent except for the wind moving through the pines. "Those were your uncle's men?" Jeremiah asked quietly. Naira nodded. "Looking for me. They will search camp. When they do not find me, they will try to track. In the dark, Dakota's trackers are good. We cannot stay here long." Jeremiah considered their options. They were in the high country now, terrain he knew well from his 2 years of solitude. If they moved carefully, stayed alert, they might be able to stay ahead of pursuit. But Naira was exhausted, and he was injured. Neither of them was in condition for a long chase. Can you travel at first light? He asked. I must. Then sleep now. He shifted his position, settling his back against a tree where he could see both approaches to the clearing. I'll keep watch. While Naira looked at him, surprise flickering across her tired features. You trust me that much? No, Jeremiah said honestly, but you bought me. Figure that counts for something. He paused, then added, and you stepped between me and that man who tried to push me. You didn't have to do that. Something changed in Naira's expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes that suggested she had not expected to be seen, to be noticed in that way. She wrapped the blanket around herself and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into the exhausted sleep of someone who had been running for too long. Jeremiah sat in the darkness and listened to the forest. An owl called somewhere to the east. Small animals rustled in the undergrowth. The wind sighed through the high branches. Normal sounds. No indication of pursuit. Not yet. He thought about the woman sleeping beside him, about her steady voice when she had told Gannon to free him, about the way she had used the last valuable thing she owned to buy a stranger's freedom, about her simple, devastating honesty. I needed someone. You were alone too. For 2 years he had told himself he preferred solitude, that trusting people only led to betrayal, that the mountains were safer than any human relationship. But sitting here in the dark, with this woman's quiet breathing beside him, he felt something he had thought was dead. Hope. Not for love or happiness or any of the things he had given up on. Just hope that he might survive, that he might not die alone on some frozen ridge with no one to know or care, that perhaps this strange bargain they had made might turn into something more than shared desperation. He did not sleep. He sat through the long hours of darkness, watching and listening, while the woman who had bought him rested. And when dawn began to paint the eastern sky with pale light, he gently touched her shoulder. Time to move, he said quietly. Naira woke instantly, alert in the way of people who have learned that deep sleep can be fatal. She looked at him, at the gray dawn light filtering through the trees, and nodded. They stood, packed their meager supplies, and began to walk. West, away from the renegade camp, deeper into the mountains. Two people who had been alone too long, now bound together by necessity and the slimmest thread of developing trust. Behind them, though they did not yet know it, 3 different groups were beginning to move. Dakota's scouts had found their trail. Marcus Drummond had heard about a mountain man with a bounty being traded at the renegade post. And Jake Hollis, nursing his wounded pride in whiskey-fueled rage, was gathering men for a hunt. The chase had begun. But so had something else. Something neither Jeremiah nor Naira had words for yet. Something that would be tested by cold and violence and betrayal, but would prove stronger than any of them imagined. They were no longer running alone, and that would make all the difference. The Montana sun was warm on old Jeremiah's weathered face as he paused in his telling. Tommy had not moved from his spot on the porch, eyes wide with the kind of attention that only a good story could command from a 12-year-old boy. "Grandpa," Tommy said, voice hushed with wonder, "were you scared?" The old man's face creased into something between a smile and a grimace. He reached down and patted the Winchester rifle leaning against his chair. "Boy, I was terrified," he said honestly. "Fear is what keeps a man careful, and careful men survive." He paused, looking out at the distant mountains. "But your grandmother, she taught me something about fear. Taught me it ain't about not being afraid. It's about what you do when the fear tries to stop you." "Did she love you then?" Tommy asked. "Back when you were running?" Old Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of memory. "Love? Not yet, boy. But respect. That was growing every day we didn't die. And respect, I learned, is the seed that love grows from." He settled deeper into his chair. "Now let me tell you about the days that followed, about what it means to trust someone when trust is all you got left." The scene shifted again, flowing back through time to those mountains in 1876, where 2 people were learning what it meant to survive together. Dawn came cold and gray to the high country. Jeremiah woke to the sound of Naira moving quietly near the remains of their small fire. She was adding thin branches one by one, coaxing flames back to life with patient care. Her movements were stiff, the kind of stiffness that came from sleeping on cold ground with old injuries. Jeremiah sat up slowly, feeling every bruise and cut from his captivity. His wrists were raw where the rawhide had cut into them, and his ribs ached with each breath. But he was alive, and the morning light filtering through the pine trees felt like a gift he had not expected to receive. Naira glanced at him, her eyes already alert despite obvious exhaustion. "You are awake," she said softly. It was not a question. "Yeah." Jeremiah rubbed his wrists carefully, feeling the damaged skin. "How long you been up?" "Not long. Fire died in night. I wake cold." She handed him a small piece of dried meat from her pouch. It was not much, barely enough to ease the emptiness in his stomach, but she gave him the larger piece while taking smaller bites herself. Jeremiah noticed the way she rationed, taking tiny mouthfuls and chewing slowly to make the food last. "We need to move," she said quietly. "Camp will wake soon. Men will look for us." Jeremiah stood, testing his body's ability to travel. Everything hurt, but nothing was broken. He had survived worse. He checked the edge of the clearing, scanning the forest for any sign of movement or danger. The woods were quiet, just birds beginning their morning songs and the whisper of wind through needles. "Where are we going?" he asked. Naira's face tightened slightly. "To place no one looks for me. High country, 2 days walk, maybe 3. It was not much of an answer, but Jeremiah understood it was all she could offer. She did not know him well enough to trust him with details. Not yet, that was fair. He barely knew her either. They gathered their few belongings and began walking west, climbing higher into the mountains. The terrain was rough, scattered with boulders and fallen timber. Naira moved ahead, finding paths through the obstacles with practiced ease. Jeremiah followed, noting how she brushed aside branches to hide their passage, how she stepped on rocks to avoid leaving footprints in soft earth. After an hour of steady climbing, they reached a ridge where the forest opened into scattered meadows. The view stretched for miles, showing the wrinkled landscape of mountains and valleys under the autumn sky. It was beautiful in the way that wild places are beautiful, indifferent to human presence, ancient and enduring. Naira stopped at the ridge crest, breathing harder from the climb. She scanned the valleys below with the intensity of someone looking for specific threats. Jeremiah moved beside her and followed her gaze. Below them, perhaps 3 miles distant, he could see smoke rising from multiple sources. Not just one camp, several. The sight made his stomach tighten with understanding. "How many groups hunting you?" he asked. Naira's jaw clenched. "Apache scouts from my uncle. Maybe 5 men. White bounty hunters, I do not know how many. And now maybe men from camp because we left. That's a lot of people wanting one woman." She turned to look at him directly. "I am worth $200 to white men. My uncle tells them I killed traitors. It is lie, but they do not care about truth." Jeremiah absorbed this. $200 was good money in 1876. 4 months' wages for a working cowboy. Enough to make men take risks. Enough to make them persistent. "Why'd your uncle do it?" he asked. "Frame you for murder?" Naira hesitated, and he could see her weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she said, "Because I know truth about him. About what he did." She touched her wrist unconsciously, though he could not yet see what she was indicating. "As long as I live, his power is not safe." Jeremiah understood that kind of threat. Being evidence, being a living contradiction to someone's lie. He had been that once when Jake had accused him of theft. His very existence had been an inconvenience to Jake's story. "We keep moving then," he said. "Put distance between us and them." They descended from the ridge into a narrow valley where a stream cut through stands of aspen. The trees were nearby bare now, their golden leaves carpeting the ground and floating on the water's surface. It would have been peaceful under other circumstances. They followed the stream for an hour, and Jeremiah noticed Naira was beginning to favor her left side. Her hand kept moving to her ribs, pressing there as if trying to ease pain. When they stopped to drink from the stream, he saw her wince as she knelt. "You're hurt," he said. It was not a question. Naira straightened, trying to hide the pain. "It is nothing." "Let me see." "No, we must keep moving." Jeremiah stepped closer, keeping his voice low and calm. "Can't keep moving if you collapse. Let me see." For a long moment she stared at him, pride and necessity warring in her expression. Then reluctantly, she lifted the edge of her torn shirt. The bruising was extensive, spreading across her left side in shades of purple and yellow. Worse, there was a cut about 4 inches long, partially healed but infected. The skin around it was red and swollen, hot to the touch even from a distance. "How long you been carrying this?" Jeremiah asked. "4 days, maybe 5. Jesus. He sat back on his heels, thinking. An infected wound in the wilderness was dangerous. Without proper treatment, it could turn septic, could kill her as surely as any bounty hunter's bullet. He looked up at her face and saw the fear she was trying to hide. Not fear of him, but fear of the wound, of weakness, of being unable to continue. "I can help," he said. "My mother was a nurse back in Missouri. She taught me some before she died." Naira's eyes searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motive. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Jeremiah moved to the stream and wet a piece of cloth torn from his already tattered shirt. The water was cold and clean, fed by snowmelt from higher elevations. He wrung it out and returned to Naira. "This will hurt," he warned. She set her jaw and nodded. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, but it still made her breath hiss through clenched teeth. The infection was not as bad as he had feared, but it needed attention. He wished for whiskey or carbolic acid, anything to properly disinfect it, but they had nothing. "We need to find yarrow or plantain," he said, "plants that can draw out infection." "You know them?" Naira nodded. "I know. I will look." "Not now. Rest first. We'll camp here for an hour. Let you gather strength." "We do not have time." "We don't have time for you to die either," Jeremiah said flatly. "An hour. Then we move again." She wanted to argue, he could see it in her eyes. But exhaustion and pain were stronger than pride. She settled against a large rock, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. Jeremiah kept watch, sitting where he could see both directions along the stream. His mind was working through their situation, calculating distances and possibilities. They were being hunted by multiple groups, and Naira was injured. Their supplies were minimal. Winter was coming to the high country, and they had no shelter. The odds were not good, but he had survived worse odds. And now, for the first time in 2 years, he had a reason to survive beyond simple stubbornness. This woman had traded everything she owned for his freedom. That created an obligation, a debt he intended to pay. After an hour, they moved again. Naira found the plant she needed, chewing some of the yarrow leaves and packing the pulp against her wound before binding it with strips of cloth. It was not ideal, but it was better than nothing. They climbed higher as the day wore on, moving through pine forests that grew denser and darker. The temperature dropped as elevation increased. Jeremiah's breath began to show in the air, and he could see Naira shivering despite her efforts to hide it. By late afternoon, they had put perhaps 8 miles between themselves and the renegade camp. It was not enough, but it was something. They were moving deeper into country Jeremiah knew from his 2 years of isolation, terrain where a man could disappear if he was careful. As dusk approached, Naira led them to a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. It was partially hidden by brush and offered protection from wind and observation. They could risk a small fire here without it being visible from a distance. Jeremiah gathered wood while Naira prepared the fire. They worked in companionable silence, each handling their tasks with practiced efficiency. When the flames were burning steadily, they sat across from each other and shared another meager meal of dried meat. "You know these mountains," Naira said. It was a statement, not a question. "Lived up here 2 years after Jake betrayed me. Learned them pretty well. You know place to hide, place they cannot find?" Jeremiah thought about it. There were dozens of places, small valleys and hidden meadows where a person could disappear, but most of them would be deadly in winter without proper preparation. "Maybe," he said carefully, "depends on how long he needs to hide. Winter's coming. These mountains don't forgive mistakes when snow gets deep." Naira nodded, understanding the implication. They needed more than just a hiding place. They needed a winter camp, somewhere they could survive the cold months. "I know place," she said quietly. "Sacred Valley. My mother took me there when I was child. Hidden. Protected." "How far?" 2 days, maybe 3 if we are careful." "Can you make it with that wound?" She met his eyes steadily. I must. The fire crackled between them. In its light, Jeremiah could see the determination in her face, the refusal to give in to pain or fear. He recognized it because he had worn that same expression for 2 years, alone in these mountains, stubbornly refusing to die. Tell me about your uncle, he said, about why he wants you dead. Naira was silent for a long time, staring into the flames. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Dakota is my father's younger brother. He wanted to be chieftain, but my father was chosen. For 2 years, Dakota watched and waited. She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to her wrist again. Then my father led hunting party. Dakota went with him. They were ambushed, my father said. Comanche raiders. My father killed. But you don't believe that. I heard Dakota talking to his warriors. Late at night when he thought no one listened, he was boasting about how clean it was done, how no one suspected. Her voice hardened. He murdered his own brother, took the chieftain role, and now I am the only one who knows truth. Jeremiah felt cold anger settling in his gut. Fratricide, the murder of blood family. It was one of the oldest crimes, the deepest betrayal. Why didn't you tell the tribal council? I tried. They did not believe me. I am just a woman. He is respected warrior. She looked up at him. You understand? To have truth and have no one believe? Yeah, Jeremiah said quietly. I understand. They sat in silence, two people bound by parallel injustices. Both had been betrayed by men they should have been able to trust. Both had been forced to run, hunted for crimes they did not commit, their words dismissed as lies. What was your father like? Jeremiah asked. A ghost of a smile crossed Naira's face. Strong, he believed in peace between our people and whites. Many warriors disagreed, but he held firm. She touched her wrist again, and this time she pushed up her sleeve. In the firelight, Jeremiah could see a tattoo, an eagle, wings spread, rendered in dark ink with surprising detail. It was beautiful work, the kind that took hours of pain to create. My father gave me this when I was 16, she said. Sign of chieftain bloodline. As long as I carry this mark, Dakota's claim is not strong. Other warriors might challenge him if they knew. Understanding dawned. So you're not just a witness to his crime, you're a threat to his power. Yes, that is why he must kill me, why he created lie about traitors. Now white men hunt me too, and he can claim justice was done by their hands. It was elegant in its cruelty. Dakota had weaponized the tension between Apache and white settlers, using Naira as a pawn to cement his own position. If she died at the hands of bounty hunters, he could claim he had tried to protect her but failed. He would be blameless, and the last threat to his leadership would be gone. How many warriors are loyal to him? Jeremiah asked. Many, but not all. Some remember my father, some question, but they are afraid. And the ones hunting you now? His most trusted, Samuel and 2 others. They will not stop until they find me. The weight of it settled over them like a blanket. 3 Apache scouts, skilled trackers who knew this country as well as Jeremiah did, plus however many bounty hunters were drawn by the reward, plus men from the renegade camp who might decide $200 was worth the effort. They were being hunted by a small army, and they had nothing but their wits and determination. We'll stay ahead of them, Jeremiah said. His voice was firm, certain. We'll reach your valley and ford up for winter. Come spring, we'll figure out next steps. Naira studied him in the firelight. Why you help me this much? I bought you, yes, but you owe me nothing now. You could leave. Go back to your mountains. It was a fair question, and Jeremiah had been asking himself the same thing. Why was he here? Why had he chosen to follow this woman into danger when he could have disappeared into the wilderness alone? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. Because running alone gets you killed, he said. Might take months or years, but it kills you sure as a bullet. Running with someone, though, that gives you a chance. He paused, then added more quietly. And because I spent 2 years up here dying by inches, thought that's what I wanted. Turns out I was wrong. Something shifted in Naira's expression. Her eyes, which had been guarded and wary since the moment he met her, softened slightly. Not with trust, not yet, but with the beginning of understanding. You were waiting to die, she said softly. I know that feeling. Not anymore, Jeremiah said. Now I'm planning to live. They held each other's gaze across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them. An agreement, a partnership, the first real foundation of what might become trust. The night deepened around them. Jeremiah took first watch while Nara slept, wrapped in their single blanket near the fire's warmth. He sat with his back to the rock wall, listening to the forest sounds and thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. 3 days ago, he had been alone, resigned to eventual death in these mountains. Now he sat guarding a woman who had bought him with a beaded bracelet, planning to help her reach a hidden valley where they might both survive the winter. It made no logical sense, but somehow it felt more right than anything had in years. When his watch ended, he woke Naira gently and took his turn at rest. He slept lightly, as he had learned to do in his years alone, but he slept. And for the first time and longer than he could remember, he did not wake hoping that death might come before morning. Dawn broke cold and clear. They ate the last of the dried meat and drank from a nearby spring. Jeremiah's ribs still ached, and Naira moved carefully to protect her injured side, but both of them felt stronger than the day before. Rest and food, even minimal amounts, made a difference. They set out as the sun was just clearing the eastern peaks, moving steadily upward into higher country. The vegetation changed as they climbed, the pines giving way to spruce and fir, the undergrowth thinning as the elevation increased. By mid-morning, they reached a high ridge that offered a view back the way they had come. Jeremiah stopped there, studying their back trail with careful attention. For several minutes, he saw nothing concerning. Then, in a clearing perhaps 3 miles behind them, he caught movement. Riders, 4 of them, moving at a steady pace along their general route. "Naira," he said quietly. She came to stand beside him, following his pointing finger. Her body went rigid when she saw the riders. "Apache," she whispered. "I see Samuel's horse, the gray." They watched as the riders stopped in the clearing, clearly examining the ground for tracks. Even at this distance, their skill was evident. They were reading the forest, piecing together the passage of 2 people moving through terrain that most would think left no trail. "How long before they reached this ridge?" Jeremiah asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. Then we have maybe 2 hours head start before they can see where we went from here. They moved immediately, descending the far side of the ridge into a narrow valley. This was steeper terrain, more difficult to traverse, but it offered advantages for people trying to hide their passage. Jeremiah led now, drawing on his knowledge of the mountains to find routes that would slow pursuers and hide their direction. They moved for 2 hours without stopping, pushing hard despite fatigue and injury. The valley narrowed into a canyon with high walls, and at its head, they found what Jeremiah had been looking for, a steep talus slope of loose rock that would erase any tracks. "We go up," he said, pointing to a climbable section of the slope. Naira looked doubtful. "With my side? Can you make it?" She set her jaw. "I must." The climb was brutal. The loose rocks shifted under every step, threatening to send them sliding back down. Naira's breathing grew labored, and Jeremiah could see pain tightening her features. But she did not stop, did not complain, just kept placing one hand over the other, one foot after the other, climbing with grim determination. Halfway up, she stumbled. Her foot slipped on loose stone, and suddenly she was sliding backward, hands scrabbling for purchase on rock that kept giving way beneath her fingers. Jeremiah lunged, catching her wrist with both hands. The impact nearly pulled him off balance, but he held firm, his boots braced against a larger stone. "I got you," he shouted. For a moment they hung there, Naira suspended by his grip, both of them breathing hard. Then slowly he pulled her up until she could get her feet under her again. "Thank you," she gasped. "We're even now," Jeremiah said. "You bought me, I caught you." Despite everything, Naira almost smiled. They made it to the top of the slope and collapsed on solid ground, both of them exhausted. But they had achieved what Jeremiah hoped for. Their trail below was completely erased by the shifted rock. Anyone following would have to guess which direction they had gone from here. After a brief rest, they continued west, moving through high alpine meadows where the grass was brown with approaching winter. The landscape here was stark and beautiful, all rock and sky and wind. Few trees grew at this elevation, which meant they were visible if anyone was watching, but it also meant they could see for miles. No one was following, not yet. They had bought themselves time, As afternoon wore on, they descended into another valley, this one sheltered and thick with spruce forest. A stream ran through it, clear and cold. They stopped to rest and refill their water skin. How much farther to your valley? Jeremiah asked. One day, maybe less. We are close now. Tell me about it. What makes it safe? Naira settled against a tree, her hand pressed to her wounded side. It is Cirque, you understand this word? Like Bolin Mountains, with cliffs on three sides. Only one way in, narrow, easy to defend. Inside, water, grass, shelter from wind. My mother said it was sacred place, protected by spirits. I don't believe in spirits, Jeremiah said, but I believe in good terrain. Sounds defensible. My people believe many things you do not, Naira said. There was no reproach in her voice, just statement of fact, but belief is not required for place to be safe. They rested for an hour, both of them too tired to move further without a break. Jeremiah kept watch while Naira dozed, her body finally demanding rest despite her determination to keep going. He studied her as she slept. She was strong, this woman who had bought him. Strong in ways he had not expected. Most people would have given up by now, would have collapsed under the weight of injury and pursuit and exhaustion. But she kept going, kept pushing through pain with a will that reminded him of the mountains themselves, unyielding, enduring. When she woke, the sun was lowering toward the western peaks. They had perhaps 2 hours of daylight left. Naira stretched carefully, testing her injured side, then nodded to indicate she was ready to continue. They walked until dusk, making good time through the valley. As darkness began to fall, they found a sheltered spot beneath the overhang of a large spruce tree. Its branches hung low enough to provide cover, and the ground beneath was carpeted with dry needles. They did not risk a fire tonight. They were too close to pursuit, and smoke could be spotted even in darkness by someone who knew what to look for. Instead, they huddled together for warmth, sharing the blanket and their own body heat. It was the first time they had been this close, pressed together out of necessity rather than choice. Jeremiah could feel Naira's breathing, could sense her awareness of the intimacy despite its practical purpose. We will reach Valley tomorrow, she said quietly in the darkness. Then we can rest, build proper shelter. And then we survive winter. In spring, maybe things change. It was not much of a plan, but it was all they had. Survive the immediate threat, survive the winter. Hope that spring would bring new possibilities. Tell me about your husband, Jeremiah said. Your words that first night. You meant them? He felt her stiffen slightly. Among my people, marriage can be made by agreement, by choice of two people. No ceremony required if both agree. I asked you. You said you would stay. I said for now. For now is enough. Later you choose. But I asked in good faith. You are my husband if you want to be. Jeremiah thought about this. Marriage. He had never seriously considered it during his trapping days, had never met a woman who made him think about building a life rather than just surviving day to day. But this was different. This was partnership born of necessity, yes, but also of mutual respect and shared danger. Among my people, he said slowly, marriage is a bigger thing. Ceremony, witnesses, promises made in front of others. I know. I have seen white marriages. Naira paused. But this is not white way or Apache way. This is our way. Two people who need each other, choosing to stand together. Is that not marriage? Put that way, it was hard to argue. They were already living the reality of it, protecting each other, sharing what little they had, making decisions together. The ceremony seemed almost beside the point. I guess it is, Jeremiah said finally. They laid together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the forest. An owl hooted somewhere nearby. Small animals rustled through the undergrowth, and the wind sighed through the high branches. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. Jeremiah, Naira said softly. It was the first time she had used his name. Thank you for catching me today. On rocks. You would have done the same. Yes, but still, thank you. He felt her hand find his in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. Trust, partnership, the beginning of something that might become more. They fell asleep that way, hands clasped, two people who had been running alone now choosing to run together. And in the morning, they would reach the sacred valley. They would find sanctuary, however temporary. They would begin to build something that could withstand the winter and whatever came after. Behind them, though they did not know it yet, the pursuit was intensifying. Dakota's scouts had joined with Marcus Drummond's bounty hunters. They were working together now, two groups with different motives but a common target. And they were closing in, reading the signs, following the trail with patience and skill. The chase was far from over. But for one night beneath a spruce tree, two people found a measure of peace, and that was enough. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when old Jeremiah paused in his story. Tommy had been sitting motionless for so long that when he finally shifted position, his joints creaked audibly. The boy's face was flushed with the intensity of listening, his imagination fully captured by the tale his grandfather was weaving. "Did they find you, Grandpa?" Tommy asked, his voice almost a whisper. "The men who were hunting you." Old Jeremiah's weathered hand moved to the Winchester rifle leaning against his chair. His fingers traced the worn stock with the gentle touch of someone handling a sacred object. "Yes, boy, they found us." His voice was heavy with memory. "And what came next, that's when I learned what your grandmother truly was." "A warrior," Tommy guessed. "More than that." The old man's eyes were distant, seeing across 55 years to a time of blood and choices. "A woman of honor, stronger than any man I ever knew, including myself." He stood slowly, his aged body protesting the movement, and lifted the rifle from its resting place. "This rifle here, it saved our lives that day. But it was your grandmother's courage that saved our souls." Tommy leaned forward, barely breathing. Old Jeremiah settled back into his chair, the rifle across his lap like it had been half a century before. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of witness, of someone who had seen the worst and best of human nature in the span of a single morning. "Let me tell you about the day everything changed. About the morning when the hunted became the hunters, and a woman faced down her demons, while I learned what it meant to stand beside someone you love." The scene dissolved once more, flowing backward through time to those mountains in 1876, to a hidden valley where two people were about to face their final reckoning. The sacred valley was everything Naira had promised. They reached it on the afternoon of their third day of travel, exhausted and hungry but alive. The entrance was a narrow defile between two towering rock walls, barely wide enough for a horse to pass through single file. But once through that gap, the landscape opened into a natural amphitheater, perhaps half a mile across. Steep cliffs enclosed it on three sides, rising hundreds of feet and offering no easy way down. The valley floor was carpeted with brown grass, still thick despite the season. A spring-fed stream ran through the center, its water clear and cold. Scattered spruce trees provided shelter from wind and observation. The fourth side of the valley, opposite the entrance, rose in a more gradual slope to a high saddle that would be their escape route if the entrance was blocked. "It's perfect," Jeremiah said, studying the terrain with a trapper's eye for defensibility. "One way in means one way to watch. Cliffs mean no one can sneak up on us. Water and grazing for horses if we had them." Naira nodded, but her attention was focused on something else. She walked to a particular spot near the stream where a large flat rock jutted from the earth. She knelt beside it and traced her fingers over marks carved into the stone. They were old, worn by weather, but still visible, symbols in a language Jeremiah did not recognize. "My mother brought me here when I was 10 summers old," Naira said softly. "She showed me these marks. They are older than anyone remembers. She said this place was protected, that no evil could enter here and survive." Jeremiah did not comment on the spiritual aspect. He was a practical man who believed in what he could see and touch. But he respected that Naira found comfort in her beliefs, and he could not deny that the valley felt different somehow. Peaceful, as if it existed outside the regular flow of violence and hardship that defined the world beyond its walls. "We should build shelter," he said. "Weather's turning. Could snow any day now at this elevation." They spent the remainder of that afternoon and the next 3 days constructing a proper shelter. Jeremiah cut straight spruce logs for the frame while Naira wove branches and gathered pine boughs for the roof and walls. They worked side by side, their movements becoming synchronized through repetition and shared purpose. The shelter grew into a structure perhaps 12 feet long and 10 feet wide, large enough for two people to sleep comfortably with room for supplies. During those 3 days, something shifted between them. The desperate urgency of flight had been replaced by the steady rhythm of building. They talked more, shared stories of their pasts, learned the small details that transformed strangers into companions. Jeremiah told her about growing up in Missouri, about his mother teaching him to read into 10 wounds, about his father dying when he was 15 and leaving him to make his own way. Naira told him about life in the Apache camp, about learning to track and hunt alongside her father, about the songs her mother had sung and the stories she had told. On the evening of their third day in the valley, as they sat by the fire outside their completed shelter, Naira began to sing. It was the same lullaby Jeremiah had heard her hum before, but now she sang the words in Apache. Her voice was clear and carried easily in the still air of the valley. The melody was both mournful and beautiful, speaking of journeys and homecomings, of loss and hope. When she finished, Jeremiah found himself unexpectedly moved. "That's beautiful," he said. "What does it mean?" "It is song my mother sang to me, about walking through darkness but always moving toward light, about trusting the path even when you cannot see where it leads. Seems appropriate for us." Naira looked at him across the fire. In the flickering light, her face was both young and ancient, marked by hardship but not defeated by it. "I am glad I bought you," she said quietly. "I thought I needed someone to help me survive. But I think maybe I needed someone to remind me why surviving matters." Jeremiah felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "I never thanked you properly for what you did, trading your last valuable possession for a stranger. You were not stranger, not really. I saw in your eyes what I felt in my heart. We were same, both betrayed, both running, both alone." "Not alone anymore," Jeremiah said. "Aw." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her features. "No, not alone is." He moved around the fire to sit beside her. When he reached for her hand, she gave it willingly. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down to coals while stars emerged overhead in their thousands. "Naira," he said eventually, "that first night when you said I would be your husband, did you mean it? Or was it just words for survival?" She turned to look at him directly. "I meant it, but I meant it from fear and need. Now, if I ask again, I ask from choice, from want." She paused, then said in careful English, "Will you be my husband? True husband? Not from need, but from want." Jeremiah had never been a man of quick emotions or rash decisions, but sitting there in that hidden valley with this woman who had saved him and whom he had saved in turn, the answer came easily. "Yes," he said, "I will." She leaned toward him, and he met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, the kiss of two people learning each other, but it deepened, carrying all the weight of shared danger and growing trust, of loneliness ended and partnership begun. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing harder. Naira's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she was smiling. "Then we are married," she said, "by our own law, our own choice." "By our own choice," Jeremiah agreed. They spent that night in the shelter together, wrapped in each other's arms, as much for emotional warmth as physical. Nothing more happened beyond holding in quiet conversation, but it felt more intimate than anything Jeremiah had experienced. This was not lust or convenience. This was the beginning of something deeper, something that might last if they were given the chance. But they would not be given that chance without a fight. Dawn came to the valley with a silence that felt wrong. Jeremiah woke to that wrongness, his trapper's instincts screaming danger before his conscious mind understood why. He lay still for a moment, listening. The birds were quiet, too quiet. Even in autumn, there should have been morning calls, the rustle of small animals beginning their daily routines. Instead, nothing. Just the whisper of wind and the burble of the stream. He eased away from Naira without waking her and moved to the shelter entrance. The valley looked peaceful in the gray pre-dawn light, but that wrongness persisted. Then he saw it. Smoke. Not from their fire, which had burned out hours ago. This smoke was rising from the north rim of the valley, thin and dark. His stomach clenched with understanding. Someone was up there, watching, waiting. He moved back inside and gently shook Naira awake. Her eyes opened immediately, alert in the way of people who have learned that deep sleep can be fatal. "We have company," he said quietly. North rim. I see smoke. She was up instantly, moving to look out. Her face went pale when she saw what he had seen. They found us. How many you think? If Dakota comes himself, at least 6. Maybe more if he brought all his loyal warriors. Jeremiah's mind was already working through their options. The valley was defensible, but also a trap. One entrance meant one main exit. If it was blocked, they were caught. We need to see how many and where they're positioned, he said. Stay here. I'll scout. No, Naira's voice was firm. We stayed together. Always. He wanted to argue, but the determination in her face stopped him. She was right. They had survived this long by not separating. No reason to change that now. They gathered their few weapons. The Winchester rifle Jeremiah had taken from the bounty hunters, with perhaps 30 rounds remaining. The 2 Colt revolvers, with maybe 15 rounds between them. Naira's bow with a dozen arrows. Her bone-handled knife. It was not much to face an unknown number of enemies, but it was what they had. They moved carefully toward the valley entrance, staying low and using what cover the sparse trees provided. As they got closer, Jeremiah began to see the true scope of their problem. Men were positioned on the cliffs above the entrance. He counted at least 4, maybe more, hidden from view. They had built small fires, not caring if they were seen. That meant they were confident. That meant they had numbers. Then he saw movement at the entrance itself. More men, these on foot, moving into position to block any escape. He recognized one of them, even at a distance. Marcus Drummond, unmistakable by his size and the way he moved. The bounty hunter had somehow tracked them here or had joined forces with Dakota's warriors. This is bad, Jeremiah muttered. They've got us boxed. There, Naira pointed to the high cliffs on the north side. That is Dakota. I know his horse. Jeremiah looked where she indicated and saw a figure standing on the cliff edge, backlit by the rising sun. Even as silhouette, there was something commanding about the stance. This was a man used to being obeyed. Then Dakota's voice rang out across the valley, speaking in Apache. The words echoed off the rock walls, amplified and distorted by the natural acoustics. Naira translated in a tight voice. He says I cannot hide forever. Says I am trapped. Says if I surrender now, he will kill me quick. Otherwise, he will burn the valley and take me alive. What about me? He does not mention you. I think he does not care. Before Jeremiah could respond, fire arrows began to arc down from the cliffs. They were not aimed at Jeremiah and Naira specifically, but at the shelter they had built. The arrows struck the pine bough roof, and flames caught almost immediately. Within seconds, their home was blazing. Fall back, Jeremiah shouted. They ran toward the stream, using the rocks and sparse trees for cover as more arrows fell around them. The shelter collapsed in a shower of sparks, 3 days of work destroyed in minutes. They took cover behind a large boulder near the stream. Jeremiah had the Winchester in his hands, checking the action, making sure it was ready. Naira had an arrow knocked to her bow, her breathing controlled despite the fear he could see in her eyes. We cannot stay here, she said. They will come down eventually. Then we are finished. The back exit you mentioned, the saddle on the far side. Can we reach it? Maybe, but they will see us crossing open ground. We would be easy targets. Jeremiah thought fast. They needed a distraction, something to split the enemy's attention. An idea came to him. Risky, but possible. You remember where you said there were hot springs? Up near that saddle? Naira's eyes widened with understanding. Yes, but it would take time to reach them. Then we need to buy time. He hefted the Winchester. I'll give them something to think about. You start moving toward the springs. Stay low. Use the stream bed for cover. No, we stay together. Naira, listen to me. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. I can slow them down, give you a chance to reach safety. Once you are through the saddle, you can circle around, come at them from behind if you need to. I will not leave you to die. I'm not planning to die, but I need you safe first. Please. They stared at each other, will against will. Finally, Naira nodded, though her expression was anguished. If you die, I will kill Dakota myself. Then I will find your spirit and kill you again for making me leave. Despite everything, Jeremiah almost smiled. Fair enough. She kissed him hard, desperately, then pulled away and began moving along the stream bed, using the banks and rocks for cover. Jeremiah watched until she was 50 yards away and hidden from the cliffs by a bend in the terrain. Then he turned his attention to the enemy. He could see 3 warriors beginning to descend the cliffs on the north side, using ropes to rappel down. They would reach the valley floor in minutes. He raised the Winchester, sighted carefully, and fired. The shot echoed like thunder in the enclosed valley. The lead warrior jerked and fell, his rope going slack as he tumbled the last 30 feet to crash into the rocks below. The other 2 warriors froze, looking for the source of the shot. Jeremiah had already moved, running 20 yards to new cover before firing again. This shot went wide, but it achieved its purpose. Now all attention was on him. More warriors appeared on the cliff edge, pointing and shouting. Arrows began to fall around his position. He fired 3 more times in rapid succession, each shot from a different position. 1 more warrior fell, struck in the shoulder. The others scrambled for cover, their descent halted. Good. Every minute they were pinned was another minute for Naira to reach safety. Then he heard the sound of horses and turned to see Marcus Drummond and 3 other men riding into the valley from the entrance. They had been waiting for this, waiting for him to reveal his position. Jeremiah ran, sprinting for a cluster of larger rocks that would provide better cover. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. One tugged at his sleeve, close enough that he felt the heat of its passage. He dove behind the rocks as more shots rang out. His shoulder slammed into stone and pain flared where he had been injured during the fight at the renegade camp. He gritted his teeth and checked the Winchester. 8 rounds left. Not enough for a sustained fight against this many enemies. But he did not need to win. He just needed to survive long enough. From his new position, he could see more of the valley. Naira had made good progress, perhaps 200 yards now, toward the far end. But she was about to enter open ground where she would be visible from the cliffs. He needed to keep their attention on him for just a few more minutes. He fired at Marcus and his men, forcing them to dismount and take cover behind their horses. One man was too slow, and Jeremiah's bullet caught him in the leg. The man went down screaming. More arrows fell, closer now. The warriors on the cliff had ranged him. He could not stay in this position much longer. Then he heard a shout in Apache from the cliff, and everything stopped. The arrows ceased. The shooting stopped. Even Marcus and his men held their fire. Dakota was descending the cliff face, climbing down with the confident ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Behind him came 2 more warriors. When they reached the valley floor, Dakota walked forward into clear view, completely unconcerned about being shot. He was a big man, Jeremiah saw. Taller than most Apache, heavily muscled, with a scar running from his hairline down across his left eye and cheek. He wore traditional clothing, but also a gun belt with 2 pistols. A man who had adopted some white ways while maintaining his identity. Dakota called out in English, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "White man, you fight well, but you fight for nothing. The woman is what I want. Give her to me and you can leave. You have my word." Jeremiah did not bother responding. The word of a man who had murdered his own brother was worth less than spit. Then another voice rang out, and Jeremiah's blood ran cold. "Well, Silas," Marcus Drummond shouted, using Jeremiah's real first name instead of his nickname. "Looks like we got ourselves a situation here. Dakota wants the girl. I want you. But there's only one of you and one of her, and too many of us." Jeremiah understood what was happening. The uneasy alliance between Dakota and Marcus was fracturing. They both wanted their targets, but neither trusted the other not to claim both bounties. "Tell you what," Marcus continued, "you and your Apache bride come out peaceful-like. I'll take you back to face justice for them pelts you stole. Dakota here can have his niece for whatever family business they got. Everybody wins except you 2, but that's life." Jeremiah used the pause to reload the Winchester with his remaining ammunition. His mind was racing through scenarios, looking for any path that ended with both him and Naira alive. He could not find one. They were outnumbered at least 10-2, trapped in a valley with one exit blocked, running out of ammunition. Then he heard Naira's voice, clear and strong, speaking in Apache. She had not continued toward the saddle. She had circled back, using the stream bed for cover, and was now only 30 yards from his position. Dakota's response came immediately, angry and sharp. Jeremiah could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Command, derision, threat. Naira emerged from the stream bed, standing upright in clear view. She held her bow in one hand, an arrow in the other, but both were lowered, non-threatening. She spoke again, her voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. Dakota laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. He replied in English, probably for Marcus's benefit and to ensure everyone understood. You dare challenge me, girl? You who killed white traitors? You who betrayed your people? I killed no one, Naira called back. You killed those traitors. You killed my father. You kill anyone who threatens your stolen power. Lies, you have no proof. I have this. Naira pushed up her sleeve, revealing the eagle tattoo on her wrist. Even at a distance, the ink was visible, dark against her skin. I carry my father's mark. I carry his bloodline. Everyone here sees it. Your claim to chieftain is false as long as I live. A murmur ran through the warriors on the cliff. Even Marcus's men were watching now, sensing they were witnessing something significant. Dakota's face darkened with rage. That mark means nothing. You are woman. You cannot lead. I do not want to lead, Naira said. I want only justice. Justice for my father. Justice for those traitors you murdered to frame me. Justice for all the lies you have built your power on. Enough, Dakota drew one of his pistols. You will die now, niece, and your white dog with you. But before he could fire, one of the warriors on the cliff called out, an old man Jeremiah saw with white hair and a weathered face. He spoke in Apache, his voice carrying authority. Naira translated in a tight whisper. Red Hawk, my father's oldest friend, he says he will not follow Dakota anymore. Says he has suspected the truth but was afraid. Says if Dakota kills me now, it proves guilt. Red Hawk began climbing down from the cliff, moving slowly but deliberately. When he reached the bottom, he walked to stand between Naira and Dakota. He spoke again, longer this time, and though Jeremiah could not understand the words, he understood the meaning. A challenge, a declaration of loyalty. Two other warriors followed Red Hawk down, then a third. They positioned themselves behind the old man, facing Dakota. The odds were shifting. Marcus Drummond was watching this with growing unease. Now hold on, he called out. We had a deal, Dakota. You get the girl, I get Bear McAllister. I don't care about your tribal politics. Dakota wheeled on him, eyes blazing. There is no deal, white man. You will get nothing. Marcus's face went red. The hell I won't. That man's worth $500. Then take him yourself, Dakota turned back to Naira. But the girl dies by my hand. What happened next unfolded with the terrible inevitability of a rock slide. Marcus went for his gun, probably planning to shoot Dakota in the back and claim both bounties. But one of Dakota's warriors saw the movement and shouted a warning. Dakota spun, his pistol coming up, and fired. Marcus took the bullet in his shoulder, staggering backward. Marcus's men returned fire. The two warriors who had stayed loyal to Dakota fired back. Suddenly, the valley erupted in gunfire. All previous alliances dissolved in the chaos of violence and greed. Jeremiah ran from his cover toward Naira. Bullets kicked up dirt around him. An arrow from somewhere whistled past his head, so close he felt the wind of its passage. He reached Naira and pulled her down behind a boulder just as a volley of shots struck the rock above them. Red Hawk and his three warriors had taken cover nearby. The old man called out to Naira, speaking rapidly in Apache. She nodded and turned to Jeremiah. Red Hawk says they will help us. They will fight Dakota's men. But we must deal with Dakota ourselves. It must be Martamoin. For my father's honor. Hell with honor, Jeremiah said. We need to survive. I must face him, Naira insisted. Her eyes were fierce, determined. If I do not, I will never be free. His shadow will follow me forever. Jeremiah wanted to argue, but he understood. Some debts could only be settled one way. Some ghosts could only be laid to rest by confronting them directly. Then we do it together, he said. The battle in the valley was fragmenting into smaller conflicts. Red Hawk's warriors were engaged with Dakota's two loyal men. Marcus Drummond, bleeding from his shoulder wound, and was trading shots with another of his own men who had decided two bounties were better than a split payment. Jake Hollis, who Jeremiah now spotted among Marcus's group, was trying to flank Red Hawk's position. In the chaos, Dakota was moving toward the stream, using cover to approach Naira's position. He had holstered his pistol and now carried a tomahawk in one hand, a knife in the other. He was coming to finish this the old way, in close combat where skill and strength would decide the outcome. Jeremiah raised the Winchester, ready to end Dakota with a bullet, but Naira pushed the barrel down. "No," she said, "this is mine." She stepped out from behind the boulder, walking forward to meet her uncle. She had dropped her bow and drawn her bone-handled knife. It was a small weapon compared to what Dakota carried, but she held it with confidence. They met in the open ground between the stream and the rocks. For a moment they just stood there, niece and uncle, the last two members of a chieftain's bloodline, about to settle a debt 2 years old. Dakota spoke first, his voice carrying over the sounds of fighting. "You should have run farther, girl. Should have kept running and never looked back." "I am tired of running," Naira said. "Tired of your lies. Tired of your shadow." "Then die." He lunged with shocking speed for a man his size. The tomahawk came down in a whistling arc that would have split Naira's skull if it had connected. But she was not there. She had moved left, inside his reach, her knife flashing toward his ribs. Dakota twisted, taking the cut on his arm instead of his body. Blood welled, but the wound was shallow. He reversed the tomahawk, swinging the handle like a club. It caught Naira in the shoulder, sending her spinning. Jeremiah's hand tightened on the Winchester, every instinct screaming to intervene. But he held himself back. This was her fight. She had asked for it, demanded it. He would honor that choice even if it killed him to watch. Naira regained her balance, shaking off the impact. She circled left, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had trained in combat from childhood. Dakota matched her, grinning now, confident in his superior size and strength. They clashed again, a flurry of strikes too fast to follow. Metal rang on metal as knife met tomahawk. Dakota's blade scored a cut across Naira's forearm. She grunted but did not slow, driving her shoulder into his midsection and forcing him back. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Blood ran down Naira's arm. Dakota had a cut over his eye from where she had gotten through his defense with the knife. "You fight well," Dakota admitted. "Your father taught you that?" "He taught me many things," Naira said. "He taught me honor. He taught me strength. He taught me that power is nothing without integrity. He taught you weakness. I made our people strong. I made them feared. You made them murderers, like yourself." Dakota roared and charged, abandoning technique for raw aggression. He was bigger, stronger, and he knew it. He planned to simply overwhelm her with force. But Naira was ready. She dropped low, letting his tomahawk swing over her head. As he passed, off balance from the missed strike, she drove her knife into the back of his thigh. Deep, through the muscle. Dakota screamed and collapsed to one knee. He swung the tomahawk wildly, trying to keep her back, but his leg would not hold his weight anymore. He struggled to stand, to turn and face her, but the leg buckled. Naira moved behind him. She held the knife to his throat, and suddenly the entire valley went quiet. The fighting stopped as everyone turned to watch this final confrontation. "You killed my father," Naira said, her voice shaking with rage and grief. "You murdered your own brother for power you did not deserve. You destroyed my life with your lies. You hunted me across these mountains like an animal." "Do it then," Dakota spat. "Kill me. Prove you are like me." Naira's hand trembled. The knife pressed against his throat, a line of blood appearing where the edge touched skin. For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Jeremiah saw tears running down Naira's face. Saw the war between justice and mercy playing across her features. Saw her hand begin to shake harder. "I am not like you," she whispered. "I will not murder family." She pulled the knife away. Dakota laughed, a bitter sound. "Weak, just like your father." Then he moved with the last desperate speed of a dying animal, twisting and lunging, his own knife suddenly in his hand, driving toward Naira's stomach. Jeremiah was already moving, but he was too far away. He saw it happening as if in slow motion, saw that knife point driving toward the woman he loved, saw that he would not reach her in time. But someone else did. Red Hawk stepped between them, taking the knife meant for Naira in his own chest. The old warrior gasped but did not fall. Instead, he grabbed Takota's wrist with both hands, holding the blade trapped in his own body, preventing the traitor from pulling it free. Now, Shiho, Red Hawk gasped to Naira. For your father, for all of us. Naira did not hesitate this time. Her knife flashed, striking true, into Takota's heart, deep and final. The renegade chieftain's eyes went wide. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. He slumped forward, his weight pulling Red Hawk down with him. They fell together, the old warrior and the traitor, bound by the knife that had killed them both. Naira knelt beside Red Hawk, cradling his head. The old man's breathing was shallow, wet with blood. He spoke in Apache, words Jeremiah could not understand but whose meaning was clear. Forgiveness, blessing, release. Then Red Hawk died, a smile on his weathered face, having paid the debt he felt he owed to his old friend's daughter. The valley was silent now, except for the wind and the quiet moaning of wounded men. Takota's other loyal warriors had fallen or fled. Marcus Drummond lay in the dirt, bleeding from his shoulder and a bullet wound in his leg that one of his own men had given him. Jake Hollis lay face down in the stream, a bullet through his back from one of Red Hawk's warriors. The man who had betrayed Jeremiah had died without ever facing him, without ever admitting his lies. It was fitting, Jeremiah thought. Cowards rarely chose their own endings. It was over. Jeremiah moved to Naira's side, wrapping his arms around her as she wept over the body of the man who had saved her life at the cost of his own. The other warriors who had stood with Red Hawk approached slowly, respectfully. They knelt near their fallen comrade, speaking prayers in Apache. One of them, a young man perhaps 20 years old, looked at Naira with something approaching awe. He spoke in halting English. "You are chieftain's daughter. You carry his blood. You bring justice." Red Hawk said we must tell the others what happened here. Tell them the truth of Takota's crimes. Naira wiped her eyes and stood, though her legs trembled with exhaustion and shock. Tell them I do not claim chieftainship. Tell them I wish only peace. But tell them the truth. All of it. The young warrior nodded and began speaking rapidly to his companions in Apache. They nodded, then began the grim work of gathering their dead. Jeremiah helped Naira walk back toward the stream, away from the bodies and the blood. She was shaking, going into delayed shock now that the immediate danger had passed. He eased her down to sit on a rock and checked her wounds. The cut on her arm was deep but clean. The bruise on her shoulder was already swelling, but nothing seemed broken. "You did it," he said quietly. "It's over." "Red Hawk died for me," she whispered. "He took the blade meant for me. He chose that, chose to pay what he saw as a debt. You gave him that chance. That matters." She looked up at him, her eyes red from weeping. "I could not kill him. When I held the knife to his throat, I could not do it. Does that make me weak?" "No," Jeremiah said firmly. "Makes you human. Makes you better than him. That's what strength is. Not taking life when you can, but choosing mercy when possible." But then he attacked anyway. Because he was a coward and a murderer. That's not on you. You offered mercy. He rejected it. Red Hawk saw that and made his choice. Naira was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Finally she nodded, though grief still marked her features. They sat together as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The warriors finished gathering their dead and approached one final time. The young warrior who had spoken earlier addressed Naira with respect. "We go now, take bodies home, tell truth. When spring comes, we return. Bring news of how tribe receives the truth. If you wish to come home then, you will be welcome. If you wish to stay here with your husband, that is also honored." "Thank you," Naira said, "for standing with me, for believing." The warriors departed, riding out of the valley with their dead tied across saddles. They left behind Marcus Drummond, still breathing but unconscious from blood loss. They left Jake Hollis's body where it lay. And they left Takota, the traitor whose crimes had been exposed at last. Jeremiah and Naira spent the rest of that day in silence, too exhausted and emotionally drained to do more than sit together by the stream. As evening approached, Jeremiah stirred himself to deal with the grim necessities. He dragged the bodies away from their campsite, including Takota and Jake. He gathered weapons and ammunition from the fallen. He checked on Marcus, found the man still breathing, and made the decision to bind his wounds and give him water. Let him live or die as his body chose. When full dark came, Jeremiah built a fire near the stream. They had no shelter now, but the night was not too cold, and they had blankets. Naira sat close to the flames, staring into them with eyes that saw beyond the present moment. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Jeremiah settled beside her. "We rebuild the shelter, hunt and gather for winter, survive the cold months. In spring, we decide what comes next." The warrior said I could return to my people. "Do you want to?" She was quiet for a long time. "I do not know. They believed Takota's lies for 2 years. Even if they believe truth now, can I forgive that? Can I live among them again?" "That's for you to decide, not right now. Take time. See how it feels in spring." Naira leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I want to stay here," she said finally, "with you. Build a life in this valley. Maybe visit my people sometimes. But not live there. Not anymore." "Then that's what we'll do." "You do not want to return to your people either?" Jeremiah thought about Missouri, about the settlements and towns he had left behind years ago. "No, my people betrayed me, or enough of them did that I don't trust the rest. This valley, these mountains, they're honest, hard but honestists. That suits me." "Then we stay." They sat in silence, watching the fire burn. Above them, stars emerged in their thousands, clear and bright in the mountain air. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and cold water. It was beautiful in a way that the world beyond these cliffs could never be. Pure, untouched by the lies and betrayals of civilization. Over the following weeks, they rebuilt their shelter, stronger this time. They hunted and gathered, preparing for winter. Marcus Drummond eventually regained consciousness, and Jeremiah gave him a choice: leave now with supplies, or stay and face the coming snow with a wounded leg. Marcus chose to leave, and Jeremiah watched him ride away, knowing the bounty hunter would likely not survive the journey down from the mountains, but feeling no particular emotion about it either way. That was Marcus's choice, his problem. Winter came hard and early to the valley. Snow fell in November and did not stop until April. But the shelter held. The food they had gathered and hunted lasted, and they survived together, learning each other in the intimate way that only isolation and dependence can teach. In the deep cold of January, Naira told Jeremiah she was pregnant. He felt fear and joy in equal measure. A child in the wilderness was dangerous, but it was also hope, a future, a reason beyond mere survival. Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted, the streams swelled, and green returned to the valley. The Apache warriors came as promised, bringing news that the tribe had accepted the truth about Dakota. Naira's name was cleared. She was welcome to return at any time, but Naira chose to stay. The valley was her home now. Jeremiah was her home, and the child growing inside her needed both. The warriors brought gifts, blankets and food, tools and seeds. They promised to return each spring to maintain connection even across distance. Then they departed, leaving Jeremiah and Naira to their chosen life. The child, a boy, was born in late summer. They named him Thomas, after Jeremiah's father, and in naming him they bound two worlds together: white and Apache, mountain and valley, past and future. On the porch in Montana in 1931, old Jeremiah reached out and touched young Tommy's head, his hand gentle. "That was your father," he said quietly, "born in that sacred valley 54 years ago. First of 5 children. You are named after him, boy, after a good man who bridged two worlds." Tommy was crying silently, overcome by the weight of the story. "What happened to the valley, Grandpa? Do we still have it?" "We do. Your Uncle James lives there now with his family, running cattle and horses. That valley has been in this family for 55 years, and it'll stay in the family long after I'm gone." He paused, looking toward the mountains. "Your grandmother died there last winter, buried next to Red Hawk, who she always said was her second father." "Did you love her, Grandpa? Really love her?" Old Jeremiah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Boy, I loved her more than my own life. More than these mountains. More than breathing. She saved me from dying alone and bitter. Taught me what it meant to stand beside someone through everything. Good and bad. Easy and hard. Love and loss." He wiped his eyes with his weathered hand. and I'd do it all again. Every hard mile, every cold night, every moment of fear. Because those moments led to 54 years with the finest woman who ever lived. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in gold and purple. Old Jeremiah stood slowly, using his Winchester as a cane. He walked to the porch railing and looked out at those distant peaks where his life had truly begun all those years ago. "Remember this story, Tommy," he said. "Remember that honor matters, that standing by your word matters, that the hardest choices are often the right ones. And remember that love, real love, is something you build together through shared hardship and mutual respect. It ain't easy, but it's worth everything." Young Tommy stood beside his grandfather, looking out at those same mountains, feeling the weight of legacy settling on his young shoulders. He did not fully understand everything he had been told, but he understood enough. He understood that the old man beside him had lived a life of consequence, had loved a woman worth dying for, had built something lasting from nothing but courage and choice. And he understood that someday, when he was old enough, he would return to that sacred valley, would stand where his great-grandparents had stood, would touch the stone where his great-grandmother had carved the symbols of two people standing together, would remember. The story ended as all stories must, with silence and reflection and the slow settling of wisdom into young hearts. The mountains stood eternal, witnesses to lives lived and stories told. And in a hidden valley high in those peaks, the wind moved through spruce trees over ground that had been sacred long before the people came and would be sacred long after they were gone. But for 55 years, that valley had been home, had been witness to a love that began with a beaded bracelet and a desperate gamble, had sheltered two people who chose each other when the world offered only loneliness and death. And that, old Jeremiah knew as he watched the sun set one final time, was enough, more than enough. It was everything.